As you know, and I know, and we have been talking about here for the last couple of years or so, maybe longer, there's been a racist attack on white Americans where blacks have been killing, beating up, knocking out, robbing, raping, setting on fire white Americans, and barely a word about it. And the national media, I don't think there's anything about it. Once in a while, you might hear something, but the local media, barely a word about it. And I've been warning white Americans for 25 years that if you don't start speaking up and getting involved, that I just don't know what to say going to happen to you. White Americans are now starting to speak up. Some are. Most are still not speaking up for fear of being called racist. And when you don't speak up and deal with your enemy, you bring out the worst in your enemy. And that's what's happening with black Americans. Not all, but many. They are just, I mean, they're so angry. And because white people don't say anything or do anything, we do have a race war already happening. It's been going on for a couple of years now. Kyle Hunt is back with us. He is a radio host and founder of Renegade Broadcasting in Florida. He led the White Man March in 2014 to raise awareness of the genocide of European people across the world. And I wanted Kyle back because I wanted to talk to him about his rally, the attack on whites in the wake of Dylan Roof and Frazier Glenn Cross, also known as Glenn Miller, shooting. Kyle, good morning, sir, and welcome back.
Oh, good morning to you, and thanks for having me.
So what have you been up to since the March of 2014?
Well, so much has happened since then. So I've been responding to what's going on. I've been continuing to put out documentaries, videos, and articles and radio shows, of course. But since we talked, the illegal invasion of the United States ramped up at an incredible rate. And it really has, I think, woken up a lot of people, white and black alike, to the problem that we're facing and how this is really undercutting our labor and how this is really an attack against us. While the very rich are benefiting from it, and of course the politicians, especially the Democrat Party, is benefiting from all of these new voters. And it is just incredible that to say anything about wanting to have the federal laws of this country enforced is considered racist and evil, and it's not even within the polite political discourse. And you see how Donald Trump has been treated for even bringing up the notion that perhaps we should actually enforce borders.
Yeah.
Most countries around the world do enforce their borders. It's just white European countries or predominantly white countries that are expected to open up their borders to anybody who wants to come in. And that's only going to incentivize this flood that's coming in. When you say, if you get into our country, you're going to have housing, food, medical, education, we'll just bend over backwards to make you feel welcome. They're going to come in. And that's what we're seeing take place in Europe right now as well. So I've been keeping my eye on all of the developments that have taken place. And as you mentioned, the shootings, there's been a whole lot of talk about white supremacists and race war since then. And it's just amazing to watch the media's reaction to these shootings. Let's say if you compare and contrast the Dylan Storm Roof shooting to the Vesterly Flanagan shooting, it's just amazing. On one hand, white people are expected to answer for the crimes of one person.
Yeah.
While on the other hand, blacks are not held responsible. Gays as well. He had the big rainbow flag. We're not expected to take down the rainbow flag, but after Dylan Storm Roof goes and shoots people, you've got to have all of the Confederate flags come down, and it's very frustrating to watch this, especially when you see all of the rhetoric that is coming out about how white people are, inherently evil, that they're getting what they deserve. and that to speak up for themselves is just racist. It's wrong. You
Who
white people are
decided
expected.
that, Kyle? Who decided that we are going to attack white Americans around the world? We're going to take away their freedom of speech. We're going to take away their ability to fight back by accusing them of being racist if they should fight back. Who decided that and why?
Well, this might not be a popular thing to say amongst certain crowds, but the civil rights movement itself, although there were some good parts, has been really about disenfranchising white people, and it has been openly led by Jewish people. If you look at who's behind the white privilege conferences, who owns most of the mass media that is promoting this idea of white privilege and white guilt and black victimization, it's largely Jewish people. And this is one of the things that really frustrates me, because they talk about white privilege. They try to browbeat us, try to talk about white guilt, about the slave trade, when Jews played a huge role in the transatlantic slave trade. There's a publication now called Who Brought the Slaves to America, and it documents the disproportionate amount of Jews that were involved. Now, white people, of course, were involved as well, but we don't see any movies coming out about Jewish slave traders. No, Jews are always on the side of the disenfranchised minority in today's age, and that's why Jews were the people who set up and actually ran the NAACP for much of its existence. And so it's just incredible that I'm told about my white privilege, but we don't hear about Jewish privilege. For example, the last 6 Federal Reserve chairmen were Jewish. Now, if they're only making up 2% of our population, that seems to indicate to me that there actually is not diversity at the highest levels, that there's a misrepresentation of a particular group. And yes, some of this could be due to merit, but a lot of it is due to ethnic networking and tribalism. Jews are allowed to organize as Jews. They do it very, very well. Blacks are allowed to organize as blacks. Mexicans are allowed to organize as Mexicans, as Central Americans or South Americans. This is perfectly fine. La Raza means the race. This is the Hispanic advocacy group, La Raza. Now, this isn't even considered racist. In fact, they get huge corporate sponsors. Barack Obama will go and speak to La Raza. But if I'm here talking about La Raza Blanca, the white race, that's wrong. That is not good. We're not expected to have any kind of ethnic interest, to be able to
why,
vote
though?
for white interest at all.
Who are the
And,
Jews that are trying to do this? Who are the Jews that are if what you're saying is true? And I don't know, so I'm just learning, and I'm hearing more and more about this happening. Who are the Jews that are going after white folks in this manner, and why are they doing it to white people?
For the most part, the direct attacks seem to be coming from the liberal progressive Jews who are behind political correctness. This is well documented by Dr. Kevin McDonald in The Culture of Critique. They're also the ones who really have pushed for open immigration. You can find articles in the Jewish Daily Forward about how Jews in America are uniting behind immigration reform and pushing for amnesty. And you can see the hypocrisy of this, because they never want for Israel to become non-Jewish. They don't want to open up their borders in Israel. And they've actually been sending black Jews to other places in Europe, to Sweden. They're exporting black Jews who come in. In some cases, they're even sterilizing them. Now, the Jews in Israel are often incredibly racist themselves by their own definition. You have the late Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, who was the chief Sephardic rabbi of Israel, who said that all non-Jews, as they call us goyim, are their slaves, and that they are the masters, and that we'll work in the fields and toil while they'll sit as masters and eat.
And so these are liberal Jews who are doing this.
It's not
hearing you
just
right?
it's not just the liberal Jews. It seems that they are willing to put aside some political differences to work towards common goals. The politically correct attacks coming from the left are mainly from one faction, though.
This is so interesting to me, Kyle. I want to go back quickly to this thing you said about the Jews and white folks. You mentioned Israel. Can you blame the Jews in Israel for defending Israel?
No, I just see a huge hypocrisy when you have Jewish groups around the world saying that Europe must open its borders, its wallets, its hearts to all of these refugees, that the United States should open up its border and needs to take care of all these refugees. And you look at the documents, and they've been the driving force, and Jews have been united, both on the left and the right, behind immigration reform, as they call it. And I don't blame Israel for wanting to maintain their homogenous nature.
Right. Why don't white people do the same thing? Just because, if this is true, just because the Jews are telling you to do it, you don't have to do it. White people are very innovative. They're very smart. They know how to do things. They know how to go to the moon and back. And why don't they just say no? What has happened to white Americans or white people around the world that they don't fight back?
I think part of the problem is because we've been victims of psychological warfare.
What do you mean?
Well, we've been browbeaten for so many years, especially since the civil rights era, into thinking that we are just inherently evil, and that to speak up for our own ethnic interests is tantamount to being worse than I've said it's worse to be a racist in our society than to be a rapist. Rapists are excused all of the time, but to be a racist, you're going to have your whole life ruined by the politically correct establishment. So it's an indoctrination that takes place since birth. And white folks inherently don't want to be mean to others. We want to help other people out. Some have called this pathological altruism, where we're willing to accept that other groups have ethnic interests, and that it's fine for them to promote them, and we're going to help them to develop, and we're going to spend resources to ensure that they have good quality of life. But we will never, ever do anything that is remotely even considered to be in support of white rights or a pro-white cause. Even Donald Trump, who is getting a lot of support from white Americans because he's the only person in the whole entire 2016 presidential field who's even willing to address the important, essential topic of immigration. That just should go to show you how rigged the system is when there's only one candidate who's even willing to discuss this issue in any meaningful way.
But Donald Trump is getting support from all cultures in this country, and it's because of his courage, not necessarily because of his whiteness. Even black people who never vote for, most never vote for a Republican, especially a white Republican, are now, the last poll I saw was 25% of black people said they would vote for Donald Trump. People like courage, and people like to see men and women standing up and facing challenges and overcoming them, and it encourages them to do the same thing. Even Mexicans supported Donald Trump because of his courage. And if white people were to display the same type of courage, then that would be all races of people defending white Americans as well. But whites are acting like cowards.
I think so. I think people respond very well to manliness, to courage, as you said, and to not being afraid of names. How weak have we become that we're just we're cowed into submission just because somebody will throw a few words at us? So a lot of this responsibility for white demise needs to lie on the shoulder of whites ourselves, because we've become cowards. That's absolutely correct.
Yeah, now, I blame white people for it. I have the utmost respect for white Americans because I know a lot about the history of white folks, and I know what they have done. If it wasn't for white people, there would be no America. And so they had to do that with honesty and bravery. They a strong belief in God. The men had to be leading the way, but white men, not all, but most, are afraid of being called racist. If you're afraid of one word, there is no way that you're going to be respected. And white men have given up their families. You know, they let white women be raped and killed and whatever, and don't even fight back. So, and if this is happening with the Jews and the whites, which I know nothing about, and so I'm not doubting if it's true or not, at some point, white Americans got to say no to this and stand up and clearly fight back, and then people will start to respect them once again.
Hmm. What I've tried to do is educate white folks a bit on the history that we're not taught about, and I think this is very empowering. I talk about the white slaves that were in America, not just the indentured servants, but the Irish, who were only freed upon the successful revolution within the country. Up until then, there were plenty of white slaves. In fact, the first slaves in the New World were whites. And we just don't know anything about this because we're expected to think that only black people in America were enslaved and that it was only whites doing the enslaving, when in fact blacks held many slaves in America. Native Americans held many slaves in America. You had Jews, of course, as I mentioned, owning many, many slaves in America. And then if you look across to Europe, where we're expected just to think that the evil Europeans are just colonizers and that they deserve to get flooded and they need to take care of everybody else in the world, when it wasn't too long ago when the Moors of North Africa had control of Spain for almost 800 years and enslaved the women in harems, when the Barbary pirates, up until just a few hundred years ago, really, were kidnapping up to 1 million people off the coasts of Europe. We don't know about how the Ottoman Turks were taking 1,000 white babies every single year and using them against the Europeans, turning them into what were known as janissaries, their elite guard.
Right.
Incredible warriors, and countless other examples of being enslaved or being overrun. For example, the Mongols. But we're allowed to have exhibits in museums where the Mongols are celebrated. When they came through Europe, they absolutely devastated towns, just slaughtered everyone within it, or took a few women perhaps as slaves. But this isn't seen as wrong. Only Europeans are expected to pay for the supposed sins of their ancestors, to make reparations and make amends, and
Right.
to face the consequences of their colonization, when all these other groups who have done huge amounts of colonizing are just getting off scot-free. And we talk about slavery from hundreds of years ago, when there are tens and tens of millions of people currently enslaved in the world today, in
Yeah.
Africa, in the Middle East, in Asia,
Mike,
all over the globe.
And Korea and everywhere. But let me say, and then get your response. Information without courage is no good. It's just information. And all of the things you just said, of which white Americans have gone through, is true. But knowing that information and not having courage, especially with the men, not having courage to stand up, it's not going to do white Americans any good. We need to understand what caused white Americans to become so afraid, the men especially. I can understand the women being nervous, but not the men. Why are the men so afraid? Kyle, what's your website? How can people listen to your radio show?
.com, and I also write.
I'm sorry,
for
Kyle. Repeat that. We didn't get your first words.
renegadebroadcasting.com and also renegadetribune.com, where I post a lot of articles. So we deal with a lot of different issues. We've dealt with these shootings that you mentioned. And to be honest, it's hard for me to accept the media narrative on almost anything. They've been caught lying so many times.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's usually to get people into a war, to get us into a war
Absolutely.
that we should not be in. And what I think is taking place right now with some of these shootings, which seems suspicious to me in many regards, is that there's a race war that is already taking place, but it seems like they're trying to kick it off to another level. And I think that white men do need to stand up, but the problem is that it's like we're being instigated into a race war that we should not be fighting. That this is basically
But you got to
contrived.
be smarter than your enemy. And you're right. I believe the media, along with the liberal aspect of our country, both black and white and Mexicans, they want a race war because it gives them power, it gives them control if we should do it. But white people are pretty smart. Why can't white men in today's America outsmart their enemies in the manner that they did in order to create this great nation?
I think we can. It's
But why
just
don't you
that,
do it then?
well, we're facing assault from almost
That's
every single
okay.
angle.
It's
Well,
fine. That makes you
well,
stronger.
I agree.
I mean, look at what I go through. I'm called Uncle Tom, sellout, the nigga, coon train, and there are people who are trying to really destroy my radio show, all kinds of things. But I love what's right more than anything else. What's right means more than anything physical or material, and I have no fear, and I love what's right, so I'm just continuing to fight with truth.
If you were pushing the black victimization mentality, who knows? George Soros might send you $33 million like he did to Black Lives Matter. So we're facing, as white folks in this country, really a well-organized, well-funded coalition. And this coalition, somehow they've been able to tie together all of these disparate minority groups, blacks with Hispanics, with LGBTQ, along with white women as well. White women have been used as a weapon against white men through feminism.
That's right.
And it's very hard for a lot of white men to they're not willing to lose their jobs and to go completely against everything that is considered correct or politically correct.
But that's a
in this
weakness,
country.
though. That's a weakness.
Oh, I agree. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing, and hopefully inspiring others to start speaking out and speaking up. And I think that we will find common ground amongst various people, various ethnicities and races who are proud of their own. Just because I have pride in my heritage doesn't mean that I don't want black people to have pride in their heritage. Quite the opposite. It's not a zero-sum game where the more pride I have, the less pride that blacks can have. I think we all need to be proud of ourselves and to recognize our strengths and our weaknesses, and not pretend like everyone is exactly the same. That
Kyle,
male equals female.
Kyle, what you don't understand, or you seem not to understand, you might understand it, is that it's not about pride, it's not about color, it's not about male or female. It's a battle between good and evil. And the one thing that the liberals are really good at doing is gathering the people who love evil, bringing them onto their side. They know how to organize, they know how to convince, they know how to promote, they know how to bring all of these people who hate good and love evil, the ones who are complaining, the ones who are saying that they're victims. Those people are just weak, pathetic people. And so the children of the lie know how to manipulate that. The children of good, because of God being in us, we should be smarter than them. There should be a way not to have a debate based on how they are speaking, but based on the truth. And then you will find that we would bring all races to the side of good. But we got to not have the same conversation that they're having. If they say you hate women, let them think that. If they say you hate blacks, let them think that. It's just a way of manipulating. You know what the truth is, so you need to operate from the truth and bring and attract all the children of good to your side.
I think one of the things that could really help us to get the truth out there, to live peacefully, is to have freedom of association. If black folks and white folks want to live together, then so be it. They can have a place where they're living together. If white folks want to live with white folks, I think they should be allowed to. I think that this is a right that everybody should have. And it's really, as we mentioned in the last show I did, it's really only white people who are expected not to have any kind of homogenous communities. But
Right.
all of this forced diversity causes conflict. Why should we be forced together, even if it's just ideological differences that separate us? Why do we have to be forced together when all we're going to do is fight? Why can't we separate and go our
You
own
don't
ways?
have to. You just need to fight back. You don't have to. Some laws, and they have these so-called anti-discrimination laws, and those laws are wrong. They were wrong back when Martin Luther King Jr. was around, when they forced white and blacks to come together. You cannot force anyone to love you. They have to love you freely. Even God doesn't force us to love him. You have to come freely and love him. And the big mistake that they made was when they had forced busing, forced housing, and it divided rather than unite, because you can't make anyone love you. And so don't worry about them loving you. I don't care what they think. Let me go out to Owensville and talk to Michael. Michael, good morning, sir. You are with Kyle Hunt.
Hey, Kyle, how you doing?
Doing well, thanks.
Yeah, I haven't seen Jesse this excited since Trayvon Martin died. I mean, wow. Jesse, I can hear in your voice. You're pretty excited.
I'm pumped up, buddy. Talking to a white man who is not afraid to fight back.
I see.
Yeah. And what's your question?
Yeah, man. No, well, if
That's all you wanted to say?
No. If you let me finish, I can get to the question. I was just, I could see your excitement. But hey, Kyle, what exactly, like, say if you had the power to transform America into the way that Kyle likes it, what would that America be like? Because I see that Jesse is like, you got to fight your enemies. I'm kind of curious as to what enemies is he talking about as your enemies. I don't understand. So it's actually like a two-part question.
Well, for me, it would be people who are literally traitors to this country, who are my enemies, people who are deliberately seeking the genocide of my people. Those are my enemies. The average black person out there, not my enemy. Average Mexican, not my enemy. There are definitely some white people who I'd put in there as my enemies, though. As for what I'd like the country to look like, I think we need secure borders. I think we need a secure and prosperous monetary system that is not based on usury and debt, but really on production, on our labor. And I think that freedom of association, which I mentioned before, would play a key role in strengthening all communities and creating a much more peaceful and harmonious country.
Well, it sounds to me that you're talking about the government there as your enemy.
In many cases, the government and its policies are going directly against my interests and are, in fact, by the definition of genocide, committing genocide against the white European people in this country. You look at the percentage of white people in the country, it was in 1960s, it was around 90%. Now, today, it is somewhere above 60% in the official figures. But when you account for all of the illegal immigrants, it seems to be much less than that. Already in the U.S. public schools, white children are now a minority, but they're still going to be taught about white privilege and about white guilt. So I don't think they'll ever get minority protection. It'll be kind of like in South Africa, where the minority, the white people, are still discriminated against through affirmative action.
Kyle, there are more white people in America still today, even though that's changing, than there are other races of people. So you still have time, and I want to ask you more about the Jewish situation, but in Israel, and I have utmost respect for Israel because, I grew up a Christian and I was taught that way, but I like the way that they protect their country. They don't just let anyone come in and take over and cause them to become the victim. They don't seem to fall to the guilt that white Americans have allowed, and sound like whites around the world have allowed themselves to give into. And black people, just as this caller here, Michael, They don't know that they are being used by
Wait a minute, Jesse. You don't even know
the
me.
children of evil.
So why would you even say that?
In order to make them hate the white man and blame the white man.
You never met me in my life.
They're not
anything blaming the white man about anything. I just asked you a question.
Michael, hold
Listen
on.
to what Jesse's saying about a person that he doesn't.
They don't know that they're. Michael threatened me, by the way, Kyle. I do know Michael. I had to send the cops to his house. So he said he would behead me because he think I'm a sellout. So I do know him. But anyway, you still have time to stand up and fight back in the right way, of course, if you can see and understand how to fight and what's really going on.
Yeah, well, what's frustrating, and a lot of things are, is that there are open calls in the media for violence against whites. And now sometimes it seems a little bit subtle, but Jesse Benn, writing for the Huffington Post, just last month wrote about how if we want racial justice, we need to see some white wounding. Now, he probably means, he says he means wounding our psyche or just, wounding the whiteness establishment, white supremacy. But just think if we were to have an article out there in the mainstream press about how if we want racial justice, we need black wounding or Jewish wounding, because Jesse Benn himself, although he was writing as a white person in that article, is actually a Jewish person, and he identifies as being a Jew first and foremost. And if you look at the publications coming out of Israel, they actually say that no, Jews aren't white. Yes, Ashkenazi Jews have light skin, but they are not white. So there's a big confusion, especially among the black community, as to who these white supremacists are, when it seems many of the people that they're talking about are in fact Jewish supremacists who have a supremacist ideology of being the chosen ones and how everybody else is goyim.
Why are white people so hated? If what you're saying is true, and I see no reason to doubt it at this point, why are white people so hated by everybody else?
I think a lot of it has to do with falsified history and basically being incited to hatred. And some of it has to do, I honestly think, with jealousy or envy.
I do too. I was going to say, I think they're just jealous. I think it's jealousy because white folks are so smart.
Often to our own detriment, too intellectual.
Hey, Mike, thanks for your call, buddy.
Hey, tell Kyle to take down that picture of Jesus, Caesar Borgia.
See, I told you he was a racist.
Well, that's who it is. It's Caesar Borgia, painted by Da Vinci.
Okay. I appreciate it, Mike. Thank you, man. You're such a good man. Kyle, once again, give out your information, radio information, website, whatever you would like to give out.
Great. So it's renegadebroadcasting.com, also renegadetribune.com. I also made a documentary earlier this year at hellstormdocumentary.com. And I do encourage people to check out all of those sites. It might not be for everybody, but you could learn something. I really want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to come on and promote what I'm doing, and also just give me a fair hearing here as to what I think is causing a lot of these problems for white folks in America. I really think we need strong white leadership to lead the white community.
Yeah.
And we don't have it.
Yeah.
Now, I think the same thing for blacks. And
yes.
Black people don't have strong black leadership. You are one example. But there aren't many. The people out there who are promoted on the television, for the most part, I think are leading blacks completely astray. But it's not my position to properly address what is ailing the black community. I don't know black people well enough, and I can't relate well enough. So I do want to applaud you for giving an example to other black folks out there.
And thank you for that. I appreciate it. And one thing I disagree with you about, you do. What I was telling a friend of mine recently, that I noticed that God, in all cultures and most families, if not all families, that God has set aside people to represent truth on earth. And when you were talking about the Jews, I'm sure there are bad Jews and some set aside for good. In the white community, there are white bad people and some set aside for good. In black people, good blacks and some set aside for bad, and just go for messy. But those people have to learn how to present the truth in a way that it draws attention to all people of truth across the world. And know that this battle is a spiritual battle. It's not physical at all. So as a white man of truth, you owe it to black people and all people to tell the truth, because it's not about cultural, it's about spirit, it's about right versus wrong.
Well, it was great talking to you, Jesse. I think this seems like it's the end of the conversation.
It is.
Correct?
Kyle, I'm going to have you back. I didn't even get to you about the Dylan Roof and other issues I wanted to touch on. So I'm going to bring you back real soon to touch on those issues.
All right, sounds good. Thank you so much for the conversation.
All right, buddy.